So the first of these two market structures we're going to talk about in this module is going to be that monopolistic competition. So monopolistic competition. So monopolistically competitive markets, so as we just talked about, there's many small firms that have differentiated products. So let's start off by talking about the assumptions of this market structure and the modeling of this market structure. The first assumption is going to be each firm produces one variety of a differentiated product and so what this means is, and maybe I'll use a different color to kind of say what the implications of this are, is that every firm's going to have a downward sloping demand curve, but it's going to be really highly elastic. So they face a downward sloping demand curve because not every good is the same. It's like, think of them as having like a tiny monopoly in their particular version or variety of this differentiated product. But it's going to be a really highly elastic, so really flat, relatively flat downward sloping demand curve because, there's so many substitutes to this good because of all the other varieties of this product these other firms are offering. So that's the first assumption of this model. The second assumption is going to be that all firms have access to the same technology and kind of what this means is that they have the same cost curves. Unless something else is stated where one firm has a different, gets their costs reduced or something like that, they all have the same. When I say all, I mean all the firms have the same cost curves. So these are the first two assumptions of monopolistic competition, so I'll just quickly erase this and we'll do the last two assumptions. There's two more assumptions we need to talk about. So the third assumption of monopolistically competitive markets is that there's no kind of competitive behavior amongst firms. That there's so many firms in this industry that it's going to be too hard to kind of think about how we should react to how all the different firms are acting. And so we're kind of going to kind of ignore decisions of other firms when we make our own decision, if we're a firm. So industry contains so many firms that each firm ignores decisions by others. So that's that third assumption we're making. There's so many firms that we can't keep track of what all of our competitors are doing, and so we're going to kind of just ignore what they're doing and concentrate on how we should pick our price and quantity and how we should react to changing market conditions. So the fourth assumption, the final assumption is going to be firms can enter / exit the market. And so this fourth assumption is an assumption we also made in perfectly competitive markets, that there's kind of entry and exit in this market. And this fourth assumption is really gonna mean that the profits are gonna be equal to zero in the long run. Just because if we have positive profits, firms will enter, and we'll talk about this. But just like perfect competition, if there's positive profits, firms are gonna enter the industry. And if there's negative profits, firms are gonna leave the industry. And what, the long run equilibrium that ends up coming about because of these two things is that we have a zero profit condition in the long run. So that's the key with this assumption, is that in the long run, we're going to get zero economic profit. So these are the four assumptions of monopolistic competition. Now let's draw a graph of what the short run looks like and talk about the short run. And we'll talk about this fourth assumption, an entry and exit, and what that means in the long run.